King Charles is stepping aside from most public duties, and in this dramatized royal scenario, William and Catherine have just confirmed that they will carry the monarchy forward in his place. But Camilla did not learn the full truth from Charles. She discovered it when a sealed palace document arrived at Clarence's house, with her name missing from the final page. And when she read the handwritten sentence above the king's signature, witnesses imagined her reaction changing from disbelief to tears. Because Charles had not merely reduced his workload, he had quietly decided which royal household would control what happened next. The warning came 3 nights earlier. Charles had returned to Windsor after a demanding engagement with a red box still waiting in his private room. These red boxes contain official government papers and documents requiring the sovereign's attention. Even during his cancer treatment, Charles continued dealing with state business. That evening, however, he opened the first folder and stopped halfway through the page. His private secretary noticed that the king had read the same paragraph 3 times. Charles insisted he was simply tired. Then he reached for his pen and could not remember which document he had been preparing to sign. Within minutes, the room was cleared. By midnight, William received a message containing only 6 words. "Come to Windsor. Bring Catherine. Alone." When William and Catherine arrived, Princess Anne was already waiting beside a sealed red folder. Camilla was nowhere to be seen. Charles entered slowly, placed both hands on the table, and delivered the sentence William had spent his entire life preparing to hear, but never wanted to hear that night. "I cannot continue at this pace." He was not abdicating. Britain had not witnessed an abdication since Edward VIII surrendered the throne in 1936. Charles would remain king, continue receiving government papers and retain his constitutional position. But the public weight of the monarchy had become too heavy. State visits, national ceremonies, senior receptions, and the long-term royal program would now move toward William. Catherine would take responsibility for the public presentation surrounding those duties. The decision would begin immediately. William did not celebrate. He asked whether the arrangement was temporary. Charles looked toward the sealed folder but did not answer. That was the first sign that something else had already been decided. Catherine noticed a second detail. 4 chairs had been prepared around the table. For Charles, William, Catherine, and Anne. There was no chair for Camilla. Before Catherine could ask why, Anne opened the red folder and removed 2 competing continuity plans. The first placed William at the center of royal operations. The second proposed that major ceremonial decisions should continue passing through Camilla's office at Clarence's house, while Charles recovered. The language sounded respectful. It referred to experience, stability, and protecting the king's wishes. But one paragraph changed the temperature in the room. It described William's expanded authority as reversible. William read the word twice. If his decisions could be reversed through another household, he would carry responsibility without possessing control. Charles would step back publicly, but remain trapped privately, forced to settle every disagreement between his son and his wife. Then came the next twist. Charles had never requested the second plan. Anne explained that it had been developed by advisors connected to Camilla's household after conversations about the king's reduced schedule. The papers did not prove that Camilla personally wrote the proposal, but handwritten comments appeared in the margins. One recommended preventing Kensington Palace from becoming the only center of royal direction. Another suggested Catherine's ceremonial role should remain limited until Charles returned fully. Catherine said nothing. She simply turned the page. At the bottom was a proposed public arrangement. William would carry constitutional responsibility, but Camilla would remain the visible senior woman of the monarchy. Catherine would perform the work. Camilla would retain the position. William pushed his chair back. Charles stopped him before he reached the door. Camilla would be brought into the room, but nobody would confront her in a corridor or in front of palace employees. 20 minutes later, she arrived. She immediately noticed the missing chair and understood that the meeting had begun without her. Charles asked only one question. "Did you approve this?" Camilla studied the proposal before answering. She said her staff had been preparing options, not plotting against William. If Charles disappeared from public life for months, Someone familiar with his priorities had to protect the continuity of his reign. She had stood beside him through the coronation, treatment, and public scrutiny. Why should her experience suddenly become irrelevant? For a moment, even William appeared to understand her argument. Then Catherine asked the question that destroyed it. If William and Camilla disagree, who decides? Camilla answered, "The king." Silence followed. Charles was supposed to be stepping back to recover, yet Camilla's arrangement would return every disputed decision to him. It was not relief. It was responsibility entering through another door. Anne placed the second plan aside. Charles then opened the original continuity order. State audiences would be delegated where constitutionally permitted. William would assume the leading public program and approve long-term ceremonial planning. Catherine would oversee major receptions, diplomatic presentation, and the visible household program accompanying William. Camilla would remain queen and continue her patronages, but her office would not possess the power to revise decisions made under William's delegated responsibilities. Camilla's composure finally broke. She asked Charles whether decades of loyalty now counted for nothing. Charles replied that this was not a judgment upon their marriage. It was a boundary between personal access and royal authority. Camilla looked toward William, perhaps expecting him to soften the decision. He did not. But he also refused to humiliate her. William said he would accept the responsibility only if the announcement protected Charles's dignity and preserved Camilla's position as queen. Respect, however, would not mean divided command. Charles reached the final page. The prepared document already contained formal language from advisors, but instead of signing immediately, he took his fountain pen and wrote a sentence in the remaining blank space. No private household may delay or reverse duties delegated under this order. The sentence did not mention Camilla. It did not need to. Charles signed beneath it. Anne witnessed the signature. And when the royal seal was applied, the room understood that the decision had become final. Camilla left without another word, but the most painful moment came at Clarence House. A sealed copy arrived before the public announcement. Camilla turned through the pages until she reached the handwritten restriction. Her title remained. Her marriage remained. Her charities, residence, and staff remained. But the ability of her office to shape William and Catherine's decisions had disappeared in one sentence. That was when the imagined tears came. Not because Catherine had replaced her as queen, but because the monarchy's center of gravity had moved while Charles was still alive. By morning, Buckingham Palace was surrounded by cameras. William and Catherine entered through a side doorway. Anne arrived separately. Camilla's car was scheduled, then canceled. Inside, Charles prepared to address the country. He would not announce an abdication. Under this arrangement, he remained sovereign. William was not yet king and Catherine was not yet queen. But symbols often reveal what official language tries to soften. 2 ceremonial positions had been prepared behind Charles. One for William, one for Catherine. Charles faced the cameras and confirmed that his recovery required a substantial reduction in public duties. He announced that William would assume a broader leadership role and that Catherine would support the expanded ceremonial program. Then William and Catherine entered together. Neither smiled. William promised to serve in support of the king. Catherine spoke only briefly, describing the responsibility as a duty accepted with humility. But the question dominating every newsroom was not what they said, it was who was missing. Charles thanked his family, advisors, and medical team. He did not announce a new operational role for Camilla. At Clarence House, she watched the broadcast beside the sealed order. When Catherine appeared beside William, Camilla reportedly imagined the future arriving years earlier than expected. Yet Charles had one final surprise. After the cameras stopped, Anne returned to the private room carrying another folder, one William had not seen. Its title concerned palace access, staff authority, and royal residences during the transition. Charles opened it and discovered that one decision had already been approved before his public address. It identified the first royal office that would lose unrestricted access to Buckingham Palace if competing instructions continued. The office named on that page was based at Clarence House. William looked toward his father. Catherine looked toward Anne. And Charles realized that stepping aside had not ended the struggle. It had only revealed where the next one would begin. Do you believe Charles was right to give William and Catherine clear authority? Or should Camilla have retained a formal voice during his recovery? Share your opinion below, subscribe to Celeb Burst News, and stay with us, because the second sealed folder may prove even more explosive than the first.